Albert Breer of the MMQB joining us now. What's up, buddy? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I apologize. I think it was like, I want to say like John Harbaugh had just been fired during when I normally come on with you guys. Is that right?
It was 8 minutes prior to you coming on. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got like 3 calls from a 216 number. I'm like, I think they'll understand. So,
yeah, we certainly did understand because it basically took over the rest of our show. So I do kind of want to, I guess maybe we'll go here. What do you think is what's the latest you're hearing on the Harbaugh sweepstakes and how this thing is to go?
Yeah, I think he's taking a beat and like just kind of collecting his thoughts. It's, obviously, like I think we all want answers quickly in this environment, and this like just feels like a lot of times these decisions are microwaved. So I think he's certainly entitled to taking a minute and trying to figure out the landscape. And, I'd expect that he'd interview some places next week. And I think, he'll be top of the list for probably the majority of teams, and we'll see who he chooses to interview with. Certainly the Giants and Dolphins are going to be in that mix. And I think, the Raiders, there's some connections to the family, of course, through Tom Brady there. And John, general manager, actually worked with John Harbaugh in Philadelphia, a couple decades ago. So there's a relationship there. And, then I think the Browns, I guess, you try and you take your swing if you're them, trying to pull on the heartstrings of, a guy whose roots are in Ohio, with his dad and his mom. So I think everybody is going to have some level of interest. And I'm just going to go ahead and, make the assumption that top of most lists,
Yeah, I mean, no question. He's obviously going to be at the top of a lot of people's list, including the Browns. So, all right, if we and we've kind of done this with we make our Harbaugh at 1, and then we kind of go everyone else. In the everyone else category, that includes McDaniel, that includes Jesse Minter, who's interviewing today, Jim Schwartz in there as well. What does it feel like for the Browns right now?
I mean, it does feel like they're going to go through a slow, deliberate process and take their time on this. And, I think you see the first few candidates show that they're thinking outside the box a little bit. Dan Pitcher and Aiden Durde are very well thought of, very, very well regarded with their teams and, as people too. And so, I think, that shows that the Browns have done their research and, are not just going to go off of some list. Now, I think they'll have more conventional candidates in as well. But I do think for them, there's like a little bit of an opportunity here to collect themselves. And part of this is the process itself being slowed down. You know what I mean? Like where you can't bring anybody in person until after the divisional round. And you have to do at least 2 in-person interviews with minority candidates that satisfy the Rooney Rule. So the NFL is essentially telling you, we don't want anyone hired until the week of the championship games, which is still a little ways off. So I would preach patience with everybody there, if you're not, wild about the names that you've heard.
Albert, do you think Kevin Stefanski got scapegoated in Cleveland?
To a degree, I think somebody probably had to pay for the back-to-back seasons that they just had. And I think it would have been hard to run it back. I think I've been over this with you guys, and I hope like some of what I said the last few weeks gave you guys an indication of where I thought this was going, because I just think that there was a lot of history there. And it doesn't mean that Jimmy Haslam or J.W. Johnson or Andrew Berry or anybody else there thinks that Kevin Stefanski can't be a head coach, right? I think it was more like there was so much history to untangle there over the last few years. And, as far as bringing energy to what was going to be a really young team next year, obviously you got the rookies coming back from this year's class, and then you're probably going to have a big rookie class with 2 first-round picks next year. You're looking at that and you're saying, okay, what's the right direction for our program? And I think you kind of look at like where you were with your coaching staff and where you are going forward. And I just think it like felt to everybody at the end like it was time. That was really my feeling, and that they couldn't just run it back, and that, it was going to be hard to kind of hit the reset button, start anew. Now, I would say this, I do think to some degree it's on ownership too. You have to, if you've got good people in the building, you got to kind of sort through that. And, I think Mike Vrabel, is a good example, right? Where in Tennessee, the atmosphere in the building wasn't great, right? And so, at the end, I think there was a little bit of a divide there from between the Vrabel people and the non-Vrabel people. And the owner came in and sensed that. And, she's only there once a week, and she comes in and senses that, and then she winds up firing Mike. Well, was that the right thing to do? Or should you have gone in and said, hey, we have a good head coach. How do we set this up differently where this will work better for him? I think that's always the million-dollar question in these situations.
Given that Andrew Berry didn't get fired, do you think that he is on a short leash here? Do you think he enters this season on the hot seat, or do you think that, nope, Kevin Stefanski's the fired guy, and then AB's got a long runway here?
I think that depends on who the head coach is. I think if you're bringing in John Harbaugh, let's say they take their swing for the fences and they put it over the fence, right? Which I think would be grand slam hire for them. I don't think that it'd be the most attractive landing spot right now. And I think they won't get him, but let's just say for argument's sake, they get somebody like that. Then I think you probably move forward with John Harbaugh with ownership saying, let's see how this works with Andrew Berry. You know what I mean? Versus if it's somebody that was really kind of Andrew Berry's pick, well, then those guys are linked together. So I think it really does depend on who the head coach winds up being. And they still believe in Andrew Berry. It's just, what does that power dynamic look like when you pick your head coach? And I think that all depends on the stature of the coach coming in, the history of the coach coming in.
If you were advising Mike McDaniel, would you tell him to take the Lions OC job or the Browns head coaching job?
That sounds like a trick question. It's going to get me in trouble in Cleveland.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
We're manning the 92.3 The Fan YouTube chat right now, just in case.
Yeah, this is going to get clipped and put up on Twitter and all that, right? I always, I'll answer that. I'll cop out and say I would actually advise Mike McDaniel to go take an OC job somewhere, unless it was a great head coaching job, because you generally don't get more than two chances at this. Some guys have gotten three, but you don't generally get two chances at this. And I do think there's great value for these guys. And look, it's hard, right? So if you're getting offered a head coaching job at 10 or 12 or 14 million, who am I to tell you to say no? You know what I mean? But I do think there's value for most of these guys in stepping back. And I look at it a lot of times the coaches who don't make it in their second chance are the guys who got second chances right away. And I can give you guys examples. Eric Mangini right there in Cleveland, Rex Ryan in Buffalo, Adam Gase with the Jets. And I think all those guys are good coaches. And all those guys, I think in their first stops, all three of those guys made the playoffs, right? So, what was the problem? Well, I think, what happens is when a guy gets fired and then he gets a second shot right away, it immediately becomes, well, it was everybody else's fault. It can be something that, any thoughts that you have that this wasn't my fault or that I got screwed, that all gets confirmed, right? Because somebody else was right there to hire you. So I must be really good. It must not have been my fault because, look, I got a job right away. And so then they don't go in and fix things, right? Whereas, if you have to go back and be a coordinator and you have to go back and kind of evaluate yourself and you fail to get a head coaching job, you're going to be more apt to look in the mirror and say, yeah, you know what? I do need to fix X, Y, and Z. And I do need to go in and evaluate myself. And I do need to go in and do the 360 look at myself. I think oftentimes guys going back and becoming coordinators forces that sort of self-evaluation where they wind up better for it. And, if Mike McDaniel in Detroit, that'd be pretty exciting with all the people, what was all the pieces they have in place.
Albert, Jim Schwartz, and Tommy Rees interviewing yesterday for this job, and we kind of have debated how serious of a chance either guy really has. Do you think, though, because I think there's a concern if you don't give Schwartz a head coach job, that he'll decide to leave? Is that a fair concern?
I mean, it's possible. Like now, look, like if they were to hire like Matt Burke, who is, who was, one of his proteges, like, and Matt Burke wanted him to stay on. I'm just throwing that name out there as a guy who worked under him, but yeah, I think he might stay. If it's somebody he has no background with, then yeah, I think, obviously you're going to look at it and say, I probably need to be out of here. So I think that could depend on who they hire. I think they like both guys. I think that's legitimate, and you can see it in what they've done to keep Schwartz there, and you can see it in how quickly they promoted Tommy last year. They moved very quickly to push Tommy up to offensive coordinator because I think they were worried that wherever Vrabel went, Vrabel would take him with him. Which is kind of confirmation that Tommy's pretty good. So I think as much as anything else, that's about taking a look at those two guys and then, kind of keeping them on hand for the possibility that maybe one or the other would fit in with a new head coach, whoever that head coach might be.
You mentioned Dan Pitcher earlier. We talked to a lot of Bengals people. They seem very, very impressed, as if we should know everything about him and see everything about him. It's like we're not around him. But I'm sure you have a million things you could tell me about Dan Pitcher that would impress me. What are some of those?
Yeah, I mean, he's got good command, number one, and he's got the respect of Joe Burrow, and I think he's been able to manage an offense. And look, there's talent there, that's for sure, but he's been able to manage an offense that has a lot of mouths to feed, and there's a lot that goes into that. Now, the obvious questions are there, and like Brian Callahan, who was his predecessor in Cincinnati, his failure in Tennessee doesn't help. Right. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot to like there. Again, coaches the quarterback directly. He was Burrow's quarterback's coach before he became the coordinator. And, just the management of people around the quarterback, I think, is a big piece of it. So I like Dan Pitcher. I think he's got a bright future. I think he can be a head coach. Whether or not he becomes the head coach of the Browns, we'll see.
Albert, when it comes to this weekend, the wild card round, many people have suggested Harbaugh is maybe slow playing the job market till next week to see if any jobs shake free, given a team losing this weekend. Do you see a job or two that might make sense that if that playoff team loses, all of a sudden their job could be open because John Harbaugh's on the market?
I mean, you'd say Buffalo, right? Because of the quarterback. Here, and I guess some people might say Pittsburgh. Here's the thing about those two. John's very principled. He's extremely close with Sean McDermott. Those two came up together in Philadelphia under Andy Reid and have a ton of history together. And obviously, he's got the rivalry with Mike Tomlin, which has been unbelievable over the last 18 years. So I don't know. I have a hard time seeing him going in and replacing either of those guys if something were to happen. I don't think Mike Tomlin gets fired. I think if anything were to happen, it would be him going to TV for a year, and I don't know if that's going to happen this time around. I would say with in the case of McDermott, there's not some huge internal conversation that's going on about it, to my knowledge, but certainly this is an important time. Josh Allen turns 30 this off season. They've got a lot that they would have to address after the season if this thing goes the wrong way on Sunday. And I think it's pressure on everybody. Same thing with the Ravens. The Ravens felt like they had one of their best rosters over the last 20 years. And they go 8-9 and miss the playoffs, which I think led to some bigger picture conversations. Certainly not getting out of the first round in a year when you don't have Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, or Lamar Jackson in the playoffs would probably provoke some of those sorts of conversations in Buffalo.
Albert, great stuff, buddy. We'll talk to you Tuesday, and enjoy the loaded weekend in the wild card round.
All right, thanks, guys.
Albert Breer there, MMQB on the Make It Right Call Kyle Wright hotline.